Welcome to the Deep Dive, your ultimate shortcut to being well-informed. We take the stack of sources you share, dig through them, and really pull out the key insights. Saves you the trouble. Today, we're looking at something specific, drawn right from the materials provided. Charlie Kirk, Faith in Turning Point USA.
Yeah.
So it's about how a public figure talks about their personal beliefs and their public work.
That's right. And our mission here, it's very precise for this deep dive. We're aiming to summarize Charlie Kirk's public statements and testimonies, specifically about his faith in Jesus Christ and how, in his words, it influences his work and the organization Turning Point USA. The really crucial part here is we're focusing strictly on his declared positions, what he himself has said publicly.
Right.
We're not, bringing in outside opinions or guessing.
That's a really key distinction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because there's so much commentary about people like Kirk. But we're going straight to the source here, to his words, trying to understand his take on his own motivations. Okay, let's unpack this. What do these public statements tell us about that link between the personal faith and the public action?
Well, when you dive into those statements, a theme pops up pretty quickly, almost right away. Kirk often frames Turning Point USA's mission, its whole purpose, as a direct reaction to what he sees as let's say, a spiritual and cultural battle.
A battle, okay.
Yeah. He frequently describes his work almost like an extension of his Christian faith. He sees it as a calling, really, to defend conservative values, especially with young people, in a culture he often calls, secular or even hostile to those values.
That's a strong way to put it, a cultural battle.
Yeah.
So how does he connect that idea specifically to what Turning Point USA actually does? Like, can you give us a feel for how he makes that link explicit in what he says?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen several ways he draws that line quite clearly. For instance, he's often on record saying his faith pushes him, compels him to defend what he terms Judeo-Christian values.
Okay, Judeo-Christian values.
Right. And defending them within public institutions, particularly universities, that's a big focus. So he views the student engagement, the campus stuff, building up young conservative leaders. He sees all that as directly fulfilling what he considers a divine mandate.
A divine mandate.
Yeah, a mandate to influence the culture. And a common thread you'll find is his emphasis on truth, which he explicitly links to biblical truth. He argues that's the foundation needed for education, for politics, for society, basically. He suggests TPUSA is fighting to sort of bring back those foundational truths.
Interesting. That really moves it beyond just like a personal background belief. It sounds like he's saying it provides specific directions for the organization itself. So it's not just I'm a Christian, but more like because I'm a Christian, TPUSA does this and this.
Right.
What other areas does he point to? Where does he say his faith has a direct impact?
Precisely. And this raises an important question. What kinds of public statements actually show that influence most clearly? We were looking for those moments where he explicitly connects A to B, his faith to an action or stance. So the pro-life movement, for example. He often discusses that as absolutely non-negotiable, rooted firmly in his Christian beliefs. And therefore, it has to be a core advocacy area for TPUSA. Similarly, you see it with his support for religious freedom, for traditional family structures. Those are often presented as direct results, direct outgrowths of his faith, and that in turn shapes TPUSA's policy positions and their educational work. He connects the whole effort of empowering young conservatives to his belief in individual liberty, individual responsibility, things he also frequently ties back to, spiritual principles.
Right. So he's really building this narrative, this public case, where the organization's activities are framed as sort of the logical, even necessary outcome of his faith. What about the very beginning, Turning Point USA's origins? Does he talk about faith playing a role there in the founding?
He does, yeah. That comes up in his testimonies. Kirk often describes feeling a sense of maybe providential guidance when TPUSA was being set up. He talks about feeling like called to do something about what he saw as a lack of conservative voices on college campuses, particularly based on his own experiences, even back in high school. And he links that calling very clearly to his developing faith at the time. He often frames the growth, the success, the reach of TPUSA, not just as, good organizing, but as evidence of some higher purpose being fulfilled. It's a narrative that gives the organization's mission a deeper spiritual weight for him.
That definitely adds another dimension to understanding him in the organization. It suggests it wasn't an afterthought, but foundational right from the start.
Yeah.
Does he also bring faith into discussions about the challenges TPUSA faces? The opposition, the criticism?
Yes, absolutely. That's another area where his faith is prominent in his public narrative. He often frames pushback, criticism directed at TPUSA, almost as confirmation they're on the right track.
Interesting.
Like proof they're doing God's work or that they're caught up in a righteous fight.
Mhm.
He speaks about needing his faith for, resilience, for perseverance when facing what he describes as adversity or even spiritual warfare.
Right.
So that perspective lets him interpret controversies or debates through a kind of theological lens. It reinforces his view that TPUSA's mission is divinely supported and worth pursuing no matter the obstacles.
So what does this all mean for what we're looking for you listening in? Well, essentially, our focus today, our specific scope, has been zeroing in on that publicly declared connection between Charlie Kirk's faith in Jesus Christ and his work with Turning Point USA. And just to stress it again, this deep dive is reporting that connection only based on his own statements, his testimonies from the sources we had. We've seen how he talks about this cultural battle, how he views TPUSA's mission as a divine calling almost, and how specific stances pro-life, religious freedom are presented by him as direct expressions of his faith.
It really does show how, at least in his public presentation, Charlie Kirk's faith isn't just kept private. It's positioned as a driving force, a very public one behind his advocacy and the organization's overall direction. And by sticking just to his words, we get a direct line into his interpretation of that influence.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. A look into Charlie Kirk's public statements on faith and Turning Point USA. It's been, I think, a useful exercise in looking just at how a figure constructs their own narrative about their mission.
And, this approach, looking at the primary source, it has value beyond just this one case, really examining how public figures talk about their core beliefs, whatever they might be, and how they say those beliefs connect to their public roles. That encourages a really important kind of critical thinking. It pushes you to seek out the original testimony first, before jumping to conclusions based on commentary. It's about understanding the stated principles guiding public action. It helps build a more, let's say, nuanced picture by starting with how things are presented by the people involved.
Definitely food for thought. And as you go about your day, here's something final to maybe chew on. When you're evaluating any public figure, any organization, how often do you really make it a priority to seek out and dissect their own explicit statements about what drives them, their deepest motivations as they describe them, rather than just relying on what others summarize or interpret?